Good afternoon. Hello, and welcome to the Zero Trust Identity's Critical Role webinar. We appreciate you joining us today for IAM Online, the monthly webinar brought to you by InCommon and Internet 2. Go ahead and share my screen. Just want to make you aware of a couple of basic reminders about today's presentation. Our basic agenda is as follows. We welcome you. We'll have some introductions, followed by our presentation, an opportunity for you to ask questions, and then our closing. Want to remind you that we are going to be taking questions and comments live using the Zoom Q&A function. So please feel free to post your messages, your questions during the presentation so that we can address them once our presenters have concluded their presentation today. You can also feel free to post messages in chat. Just make sure that you are sending your message to everyone as opposed to just the panelist and your host for this afternoon. But again, our primary place for taking questions will be through that Zoom Q&A. Rest assured, we are recording the webinar. If you've registered for IAM Online, you're going to receive an email with the link to the recording as well as to the slides. Those materials will also be posted to the InCommon website and posted on the IAM Online YouTube channel soon. So again, you will have access to those materials following today's presentation. With that, I'm happy to pass the virtual podium over to our moderator, Tom Barton, InCommon Research Consultant for Internet 2, to introduce today's presentation. Tom?
Thanks, April, and hi, folks. Well, this is not going to be surprising, but things evolve, and they leave ever deeper layers as they do so, which enables ever more evolution. And so the cycle goes. In the beginning, we built campus networks. TCP/IP slayed OSI. The mainframe lost its prominence, and we started to become an internet. So I'm going way back. Probably most of you in attendance weren't there to witness some of these things, but maybe there's a few. It was exciting and open, and we wanted to give everyone access to it. But it only took a little while before some bad guys started abusing it. We had to regard it as hostile, and we hoped to keep our campus networks safe. So began an evolutionary arms race between attackers and defenders. Vulnerabilities and threats proliferated as the depth of our tech stacks grew. We could prevent some older attack techniques, but we could never keep the newer ones out. At least we could improve our ability to detect compromises and manage incidents. But that didn't reduce our attack surface. If we knew who all of our users and devices are and what they all need to do, could we get closer to denying all of their flows across the network? Well, zero trust is one way to describe what you may need of a network and IAM practices and how those integrate to do so. But it's not a prescription that everyone is given in the same way. It's all specific and peculiar to each organization. Each campus has to figure out what it already has that can be built on and developed further into finally that handle on what everyone should be able to do. So Andy Morgan and Jason Peak from Oregon State University are here to tell us how that's been happening at OSU. Andy, so how is it going?
Thanks, Tom. Let me get my screen share up. There we go. I think you guys are seeing the right thing now. And I'm going to actually have Jason start us off here for the beginning section of this presentation.
Sorry, that's right. Jason, the other Andy.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Andy. Man, you really summed it up well, Tom. And this title slide here, we're going to start with that kind of look back, in the olden days, the physical presence would be required for access to things. You had people with few or no personally owned devices. Everything's owned by the university. Remote access would be via modem. IP-based controls would be sufficient, right? As shown in this photo. I mean, There's a typewriter and there's some IP tables in the background, kind of the same thing, but insufficient now. And in higher ed, we're kind of old hands at running networks and providing services to our users. We've been doing it for a long time, probably way longer than many industries that have now jumped on the bandwagon, so to speak. It's probably not true to say that we've rested on our laurels, but we're probably pretty comfortable in setting our ways in some places. So nowadays, people are bringing their own devices. A lot of our services are delivered through the cloud, but with firewall exceptions. To get back to campus, with the pandemic, pretty much everybody went home and worked remotely. So remote access has become a permanent fixture. So to start this conversation, we'll take the position that higher ed may be lagging behind some of the other industries out there, banking, commerce, anything to do with money is going to be probably pretty well on their game as far as security goes. So in this, in this brave new world, how do we reestablish trust and control? As Tom said, zero trust is an answer to that question. Zero trust for the win, FTW, is the expansion of that acronym. In case anybody missed it, I had to be told. So one answer is that we can apply the principles of zero trust. And the following bullets, the bullets on this slide, are lifted gently from the abstract of NIST 800-207. And I'll just read a few. Zero trust architecture uses zero trust principles to plan enterprise infrastructure and workflows. It builds up trust by considering the entire context of the session being established. What is your device patch level? What's your network location? Are you in Oregon, Iran, China? And who are you? What's your role? Should you have access to this thing? Zero trust assumes no implicit trust. It's based solely on network location or device ownership. Zero trust is a way to embrace this deperimeterization. It focuses on protecting resources, not network segments. But having started to read 800-207, it's a lot. Thankfully, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is here to help all of us. Their zero trust maturity model, which I'll probably refer to as ZTMM here and there, it is a nice repackaging of 800-207. It repackages the concepts of the academic discussion as a framework for organizations to adopt and adapt. Recognizing perhaps that implementing all of ZTA in one swipe is a tall order, the CISA authors have broken up the ZTA journey into 4 stages of maturity: traditional, initial, advanced, and optimal. And these maturity levels are assessed on each of 5 ZTA pillars. And the pillars are identity, which includes authentication, identity stores, and access management; devices, which is policy enforcement and compliance; device threat protection; networks, it's the 3rd pillar. And this is networky things. I know nothing about networks. It's magic, but they're important. 4th pillar is applications: application threat protection, continuous integration and delivery, secure application development, and application security testing, penetration testing, that sort of thing. And finally, data, the tip of the tree, categorizing data, managing access to it, and encrypting it, making sure it's encrypted appropriately. But that's not all that the ZTMM is here to give us. They define a 3 cross-cutting capabilities. And they are cross-cutting because they apply to all the pillars at each stage of your organization's maturation. The first, visibility and analytics, is where you will collect and analyze logs and other data sources to provide a means to assess your success in securing your environment. Automation orchestration. For most of the pillars, traditional maturity is marked by manual activities, whereas automation is required to achieve the higher levels, is certainly for optimal maturity. And the final cross-cutting capabilities, governance, right? Policy development, operational controls, and audit. So, all right, all together now. Everybody can read that chart, right? No. The idea to present this is just to show all the pieces together, maturity levels, the pillars, and the cross-cutting capabilities there in the horizontal gray lines. This comes from the ZTMM. So taking the identity pillar, just to tick off some highlights at the traditional maturity level, you're authenticating with passwords. Access is granted on more or less permanent basis, and your identity store is on-prem AD or LDAP or something. Moving up in the identity pillar, you'll see organizations deploying MFA, maybe some automated access expiration, hybrid identity stores split between the cloud and on-prem. Moving to advanced, we'll start to see organizations adopting phishing-resistant MFA, integrating hybrid identity stores, and session-based access. Finally, and at the very tip top, at the zenith, optimal is where you're performing continuous validation and risk analysis. You have a single identity store. Everything is amazing. Now, all right, having introduced the maturity model, let's focus in on our thesis, identity's critical role. While maturing our practice along each of these pillars will undoubtedly make us more secure, we can't do much without knowing who you are. At TechX this year, I heard a quote I liked a lot, and I'll share it here. This is from Mark Wallman, giving one of the keynote presentations. He says, IAM brings coherence to everything else we do in higher ed. Doing it poorly limits our ability to be successful. With that, I'll say over to you, Andy, for some discussion of the ZTA things we've been doing at OSU.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Zero trust at OSU. Well, we kind of decided that calling it zero trust internally was a bad idea. I mean, to our constituents at OSU. So somewhere along the way, somebody clever, it wasn't me, certainly it wasn't Jason, decided to rebrand it as Smart Access. And so that's the name of our program of zero trust at OSU. And that seems to be well received. And in fact, I know that some other institutions have, with our encouragement, stolen that idea, stolen that name. So I think other people are calling it Smart Access as well. Here's sort of the obligatory information about OSU. We're a relatively large, but not the largest university in the world, certainly. Land, sea, sun, and space grant university. So we have a lot of outreach activities, for example. And you can see on the slide there, we've got quite a few students and employees, lots of accounts, lots of identities that we're tracking, and our overachieving staff of 3, and two of them are right here. So, and just to expand on that a little bit, we report up through the Office of Information Security. So our ultimate boss is the CISO, David McMorris, Deputy Marjorie, and we don't report to Emily there, but she's another manager of the Security Operations Center, kind of, key part of the team and stuff. And then the IAM team we got here, Chris Evans is the other member of our sort of staff of IAM folks at OSU, and Doug Weir is our manager. So on this zero trust maturity model, we evaluated where we are, specifically on the identity pillar we're talking about here. Where are we now? And I think we're probably fairly typical for most of higher ed, at least, you know, when we've been in discussions with other universities and stuff, this seems to be where a lot of folks are, you know, initial, more or less. Most folks are doing MFA with passwords. We are still using passwords, but doing MFA. You know, we've got hybrid identity stores started, LDAP AD, Azure AD / Entra, whatever they're going to rebrand it to next. We do have, you know, some manual identity risk assessments that we're doing. And we do have some automated access review, a grouper, but we also have quite a bit of manual access granting still going on. We do have automation around our NetID life cycles. So that works actually pretty well, you know, so when HR tells us somebody's no longer an employee, you know, they go through a process of ending access and terminating their accounts. We also established, I'm using the royal we here. This is not Jason and I deciding these things. We decided what our target maturity level was, and it's not actually optimal. You know, I just want to point that out for people. We've decided that we want to be in the advanced maturity level for identity at OSU. And that's, you know, more or less for the entire institution. So we intend to apply these advanced maturity model principles for all of our accounts. You know, certainly all of our productivity accounts. So all the day-to-day stuff, NetID kind of stuff is going to be under this advanced maturity model. And we may overlay the optimal sort of aspects of the optimal pillar or optimal maturity level for some high-risk populations. And it's kind of things you would think about, you know, higher level administrators, research, certain kinds of research that, you know, may already have that need for compliance and stuff. And, you know, we want, that's where we want to go. That's our target. So this is actually sort of more recently when we were prepping for this presentation and an earlier version of this. Jason and I and other members of the IAM team, we kind of brainstormed like, well, what are, you know, how would you get beyond traditional maturity for the identity pillar? You know, what are the components of the identity pillar? That's kind of on the left there. What are some of the components, and what are the aspects of the identity pillar, and what are the tools that you might use or software components that you might use to get beyond traditional maturity? So you can see there we've got you know, midpoint, co-manage, grouper. When you get to a couple of these, there's not like a true, like, or at least we aren't aware of like a true open source version of one of these things. But, you know, given that like we're a Duo school and lots of higher ed is, you know, using Duo, there are some aspects of this that Duo can fill the gap for us. Duo's Trust Monitor and Device Health, if you're at a higher tier of Duo license. Just for record, we're just at the basic. I think they call it Duo MFA now, or whatever it is now, but we just have the basic one at OSU. And then we kind of postulated that some of those bits, that authentication risk decision, which is kind of also an aspect of the zero trust policy engine, or, you know, decision-making process there, that there are possibilities there to do that with some kind of like shibboleth plugin. You know, if you're a shibboleth school, we could imagine a thing where you take, you know, shibboleth's rich audit trail of authentication events, and, you know, given databases or some usage like that, where you would be able to, you know, look at the current authentication event and evaluate if it's risky based on, you know, past behavior and location, and maybe integrating some device information in there as well. So this is an idea of where you could leverage the TAP components to get sort of this holistic view of a person and make access decisions. And then little star, you know, there's lots of commercial offerings for many of those components. And in fact, we'll talk about a few of them here. So this is OSU's solution. Still kind of a work in progress. You know, we've identified the solution, but we're still trying to put the pieces together, of course. Last year, gosh, was it only 2023? Anyways, it feels like much longer. Last year, we chose Savient as our IGA product, Identity Governance and Administration product for OSU. We're still going to use Grouper though. Savient has some access management capabilities, but Grouper's a lot more powerful, a lot better at that actually. We're going to keep Grouper. We're moving towards Azure SSO for sort of consolidating on that. Right now we have Azure SSO obviously for some Microsoft LAN stuff, and we continue to have Shibboleth. But we'll use Azure SSO for non-federation logins and authentication. And keeping Duo, and then we'll get into it, but folks might be familiar with Jamf, which I actually have no idea if that's an acronym for something, but it's a Mac device management tool. Microsoft Defender, Microsoft, again, I actually don't know what MECM stands for, endpoint something, configuration manager probably. And then we'll end up with Microsoft's conditional access as our zero trust policy engine. Here's kind of for a couple of the pillars that we're well aware of what they're doing. Here's some information about projects that are going on under the Smart Access program at OSU. Saving IGA, I already mentioned, phishing resistant MFA, consolidation of SSO, grouper upgrade, other work in the device standpoint, device pillar. OSU's consolidating. We used to have many different tools used by distributed IT and central IT for device management. A bunch of instances of SCCM. I don't know, probably several things of Jamf going on. We're also trying to do an OSU machine benchmark based on the CIS Center for Internet Security benchmarks that you can download and get access to. Our version of that. Intune, we're piloting some Intune work now. That's again for like device compliance work. And Windows Autopilot for like those new device purchases to build them out in a well-configured known state. We know that OSU intends to increase the maturity of those other pillars, the network and networky things, apps and data. But IAM is not really directly involved, so we can't really give you great information about what those pillars are entailing and what those projects are. I will kick it over to Jason now for a rundown of our progress with Savient. Back to you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Zooming back in on the base of the identity pillar, I'll spend a few slides talking about Savient as it's the foundation of our identity pillar. Last year, as Andy said, we started the project, selected the product after RFP, and selected an implementation partner. And they divided the work into 3 sprints, but those sprints covered the whole year, so we probably should have called them phases or marathons or something else. But anyway, 3 sections of work, as you see on the slide there, with a couple of activities finished and a couple deferred. 2 TechX's ago, for a temporal frame of reference, 2 TechX's ago in Denver, we were just starting our requirements gathering effort. And at the last TechX, we were in the middle of our sprint 2, where we talked a little bit, gave an earlier version of this presentation. So this has been a really big effort for our IAM team, at least in terms of time, and we're still going. We're 2 years in, and we've got the following core capabilities in place. We've got an official identity repository that's in Savient, and we're provisioning the core directories and applications. This provisioning allowed us to, provisioning in Savient allowed us to retire a bunch of legacy Perl scripts and Python scripts and other stuff that we've been using for a long time. There's probably, we estimate, we're 2 years in, there's probably another 2 years worth of work for us to get where we need to be with IGA, certainly at the rate we're going. So You might wonder, why has it taken us so long, or why do we think it's going to take so long? And in part, it's because we're complicated. Untangling decades-old IAM solutions requires effort, says Chris Baumgartz from Minnesota at Last TechX. And that's certainly true of us. Higher ed has quirks. Our implementation partner did not necessarily come with loads of experience or understanding of the nuance that you will find in a higher ed institution. So, like, how can someone be both a student and an employee at the same time? Or they graduate and then they come back. Wait, so that it's a new account, different account. What a weird thing to happen. Because in the business world, you're terminated and you're gone. So we have complexity just by the nature of our organization. Implementation challenge. In our first sprint, was our big cutover where we switched off the old stuff and turned on the new stuff. And ahead of that, we did some user acceptance testing prescribed in the project plan by our implementation partner. They budgeted for us 2 weeks, and in the end, it took us probably closer to 2 months because we just have so many attributes flying around to so many different targets and making sure each one gets there. I think the number is 300 attributes going to 5 different important places, right? So we spent a lot of time to get that right. And in the end, the cutover was pretty uneventful. Another challenge is that this off-the-shelf product is a little bit of a foreign environment. We're certainly accustomed to having full control over every aspect of our stack. And this is more like a black box because it's an off-the-shelf proprietary product. Troubleshooting misconfiguration without access to the relevant code is a real challenge. Grepping the logs for some error or other is impossible because they're only available in an auto-scrolling UI. So it's a capability we had been used to, and learning to operate without, really good access to logs was difficult. And we're kind of a small team. We thought that by hiring a partner, we would be consultants for an otherwise turnkey implementation, but instead we've kind of spent a lot of time in requirements consultation, check-ins, troubleshooting sessions, kind of communicating who we are and what we do to our partners so they can make it so in the tool. And at one point, we even suspended our tier 2 support request. Our SLA was, we'll get to it when we get to it, in order to just get the project moved along. So it's been a long 2 years. And in that time, we've observed some pros and cons about the product itself, Savient. And to be fair, the cons are not necessarily failings of the product, which is probably, we think, built to serve the needs of corporations. And a corporation's boundaries are not the same as those of the university. Again, that's Mark Wallman at Last TechX. In the pros column, it's a single repository for all users. Check. We've got core populations in there. We get automated provision. It's a marquee capability, but one we had already through Grouper and various scripts. Through Savient, though, things are more standardized, so good. Accounts visible and linked. This is a new and welcome capability for OSU. We go into Savient, look somebody up, see all the accounts they have. All the accounts that we have integrated with, all the systems we've integrated, at least. That's a nice view. On the con side, we're used to writing scripts and glue to make things work, and Savient provides an API, but we found the documentation to be a little shaky, and the behavior of its endpoints sometimes is variable. Sometimes you'll get custom field names back, human-friendly labels that we've defined, or other times you'll get back the generic custom property 64. It's just a weird behavior. It's not broken, it's just weird. Configuration management in this tool is a little bit crude. For example, there's SQL inside of XML, inside of JSON, decorated here and there with groovy bobbles. No syntax highlighting or formatting, no config validation, primitive versioning. So a lot of our troubleshooting in the run up to our initial cutover was spent, chasing a semicolon that got missed or a space that was one too many. Compared to our custom system, it's a little bit brittle. I'd say it's simultaneously too complex and too simple. The configuration is complex, but for example, username generation is brute force SQL of like hundreds of lines, as opposed to the elegant looping algorithm we had before in Perl. In setmath, Andy talked about the power of grouper. Unfortunately, Savient can't use setmath to combine or subtract roles once you've defined them. So we really wish we'd known half this much during the RFP. So this is a reprise from TechX, our TechX version of this presentation. We have some recommendations for people going through RFP for this kind of a system. Get a test drive. We got a demo during the RFP, of course, but it wasn't quite enough to help us understand what it's like in daily operations, the complexity of configuration. We didn't really understand its basic theory of operation going into it. And to some extent, we're still figuring that out. And it would have been it wasn't helpful. It wasn't enough to help us understand its limitations that would force us into accepting workarounds like just kludges to make things work. Support, turns out we only paid for broke fix. So when we asked for help troubleshooting connections, there was no obligation on Savient's side to help us out. And unfortunately, the product is not perfect. It's been hard to get attention on bugs that we've discovered, especially those that require network connectivity analysis. It's like, can I observe from both ends what's happening, or actually what's not happening between these two systems? Or things are just buried in proprietary connectors that fail without sufficient internal logging. So things that an extended test drive might have highlighted for us. So it's just not the sort of support we expected based on our experiences with other software like Duo or the Tap Stack. Cost, we were shopping for a fast solution, not the cheapest. It hasn't been fast though, unfortunately. And we wonder if a more higher ed familiar implementation partner with more higher ed friendly tool might have looked differently. Anyway, it's all behind us. And we've just started a new phase of work with our implementation partner. And in this phase, we'll be tying off some loose ends from the last engagement, as well as expanding our Savient capabilities. We'll be addressing bugs that we've discovered. We'll be moving more into an operationalized stance with Savient. We'll get a handle on what it means to run this thing day to day, us instead of the partner. In deprovisioning, our big cutover was about provisioning, and in this next phase, we're going to address the other shoe, deprovisioning. Retire a bunch more legacy scripts, and let's see, other work coming up. We're going to plug in more apps, ServiceNow, Box, Adobe, and let's see. Really important for us will be to bring in other account classes. In addition to our productivity accounts, that's our NetID accounts, we'll be managing sponsored accounts, non-person accounts, and as well as accounts for loosely affiliated folks like 4-H volunteers. That's 4-H volunteers, summer camp coordinators, external vendors. And I'm pretty excited about access reviews and requests, which is part of the tool. I'm pretty excited about. We'll be making those part of our regular service offering. So when you want SSO, we'll also probably reach out and say, how often do you want to verify access to this thing? So good stuff coming up. So with that discussion of Savient, let's hear from Andy about some of the other ZTA projects in the works. Thanks,
Jason. Mentioned before, we're doing phishing resistant MFA. And here's sort of our starting state of the the Duo methods we've got enabled. Key is that we're lucky enough that we've never done voice or SMS, so we don't have to tackle turning those off. And stuff we've already done. So we turned on the universal prompt for Shibboleth and Azure SSO. And that was really pushed by the fact that we needed verified Duo push, and that's only available in the universal prompt. And if you look closely at those dates, you'll see that they're very fast. We were under like heavy phishing attack last fall, successful for a lot of our users through like push fatigue or passcodes being compromised, all those kinds of things going on. And we decided very quickly that we wanted to turn on verified Duo push to eliminate the push fatigue kind of people, or I don't know. I saw people approve the push on the first time, so it's not even fatigue sometimes. So we moved very quickly. We, announced this to campus, and 4 days later turned on universal prompt. And a day after that, announced verified Duo push. 5 days after that, turned on verified Duo push. And I would just mention that we actually thought our users would hate us, have a hard time with it, all those things. And really, they just kind of rolled with it. Some of them had to upgrade the Duo mobile app and in order to get to verified Duo push, and it tells you that, and they did that, kind of on their own. So that was a pleasant surprise. We did, do quite a bit of comms work around this. It happened quick, but we, did our best to let everybody know in various channels. And what's up next for us is actually retiring passcodes. So all of the OTP stuff, that's the hardware tokens that we've used in the past, these little phishing guys or whatever, as well as the passcodes generated by Duo Mobile itself. I don't know if we'll actually make that April 16th timeline. We've had conflicting priorities as well, but very soon we're going to be turning off passcodes for all of OSU. And that should leave us with just phishing resistant methods. Security keys like YubiKeys, verified Duo push, and platform authenticators as well. SSO consolidation that I mentioned before, it's a lot simpler to only have one solution. It's much easier to get visibility into what's going on, to apply access control in a consistent manner. Our current state is, like I mentioned, we have Shibboleth right now for SAML and in common. It also provides the CAS protocol for us. We have Azure SSO for Microsoft stuff. And since we made this decision, we're putting new SAML integrations over in Azure SSO. And our future is going to be Azure SSO, and the Cirrus Bridge will handle the in common federation stuff that we do and the CAS protocol for us. That's a challenging thing for us to make that cutover though, because there's a lot of, we have a lot of integrations. We have a lot of CAS clients still. We have a CAS wildcard for our domain. So, there's a lot there to be done, be tested as well. We also have a grouper refresh. Now that we've definitively decided, yep, we're going to keep grouper. We thought maybe Savient was going to do it for us, but it's not. So now we kind of need to get, upgraded. We got to get on current grouper, and we want to expand our use of grouper now that it's more official, expand our use of it, and use some new features in grouper, not new, but things that we haven't used before, attestations and membership eligibility kind of groups, etc. We're still working on the details of that. We know we want to do the upgrade. We haven't really started that project yet. There's sort of some architecture decisions to make about what is our actual subject source going to be for grouper in the future. Is it going to be Azure? Is it going to be AD, LDAP, all of the above, identities, to be determined. And we'd love to talk to people about that have done that well. So I'm going to pass this back to Jason for sort of our wrap up of this whole presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Right. If anybody has experience doing awesome things with grouper recently, we definitely would love to chat about it. And that's kind of the theme of this this wrapping it up part of the presentation. So we higher ed are, or at least we think, far behind in terms of security practice. And we started this presentation by talking about how we've been securing identity on campus for a long time. And obviously the threat landscape is evolving vigorously, or as Tom said, an arms race for sure. There's a ton of, at least in our environment, ton of legacy infrastructure and thinking that needs to be retooled for ZTA. Implementing a zero trust architecture then is a journey. It's not a product. It's not something you can RFP, certainly not with one RFP. On the bright side, however, every step you take on this journey, like OSU's move to phishing resistant MFA, can significantly improve your security. Like there's no wait for it, a big red curtain reveal at the end. Oh, we finally arrived. Each step gets your stance better and better. So having started our journey, we'd like to share our recipe for making smart access at home. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, assess. With the ZTMM, you can do self-assessment fairly easily once you have the right folks involved. So identity, endpoint, data network, and developers, the developers of your applications. Step 2, evaluate. Evaluate your risks and your capabilities to determine your desired maturity level. Figure out what secure enough means for you. Secure enough in each of the 5 pillars. And finally, make up a plan. Plan out a series of projects that will achieve your desired maturity level. And that series of projects is just a map from where you are to where you want to go. Easy peasy. While some projects are indeed easier than others, overhauling the foundations of the institution involves a ton of careful planning with folks from all over the institution. Identity is core. For OSU, several of these projects will be multi-year adventures, collapsing AD domains, connecting Savient to everything, getting full visibility on all our accounts. So we definitely won't be bored. And this is our current laundry list that I won't read off, but to give you a flavor of what we're looking at in the future. And, fortunately, given that we know some friends here in the community, we're not going to go it alone. And our recommendation, our suggestion, our strong suggestion is that you don't go it alone. Find friends in the community on similar journeys and learn from one another. Come to TechX and bring as many people as you can. And if you just want to get in touch with us, please shoot us an email to iamteam@oregonstate.edu. We're generally pretty friendly. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Tom, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Jason and Andy. That was great. And I really like that last pitch. We are a community. We've solved many challenging problems together, and we can continue doing so. And this is a good domain for more problems and more common solutions to them. Let's see here. There have been a number of questions, thanks folks, that have been posted, and I'm going to go through some of these and pose them to you guys. Okay, you ready for this? This is the lightning round. So you've talked about SHIB. Have you, and then you may have answered this, but have you considered delegating its authentication to Azure? And maybe, Andy, you were talking about, I think, moving your SSO to Azure. And is that one of the steps that you would take? Or you would actually get rid of SHIB and just use Cirrus for all the SAML stuff? Is that right? Other SAML stuff?
Yeah, we did consider that. And I did a little proof of concept, to make sure it would work. And it works. You can have shibboleth proxy authentication up to Azure SSO. I think a bit like Savient, we chose to kind of just use a partner, use a consultant to make that happen for us. So Cirrus Identity and the Cirrus Bridge will cover that for us. And that also kind of gets us out of running some infrastructure that, you know, I personally might enjoy running, but you know, we have a set of shim infrastructure, you know, split between on-prem and AWS nodes, and you know, load balancers, and tied to our own LDAP and our old LDAP server and stuff. So we just decided that we would try to consolidate directly on Azure where we could, and use the bridge for those other use cases that weren't covered by that.
Yep. Sounds like KISS in action. Good. Another question, and I may have missed this too, but someone wondered, would you be able to share who your implementation partner is, or maybe that's was?
Yeah, that's not, I mean, I think that's public knowledge. We're a public institution. So Grant Thornton is our implementation partner for the Savient IGA work that we're having done.
Great. And someone asked then, do you intend or hope for the Savient to replace co-manage, and maybe or would you still use co-manage? And the same question applied to Midpoint. And I'm wondering if the questioner really meant to say grouper there. You didn't mention co-manage, but if we apply the same question to you, yeah, and I think you may have addressed this, but maybe you can give a fuller answer.
Sure. We have never run co-manage. If you paid really close attention, we actually tried to implement Midpoint like 4 years ago. And we ran into, like, at the moment we were cutting over, we ran into a bug that we couldn't get around. And I really wish we had pursued that further, but we got pulled in other directions. IAM got pulled in other directions, like right after that. Couldn't continue that work until this came around, and we did this whole RFP process that we talked about. But we've never run co-manage before. I'm not very familiar with it, but I am actually curious if it will serve a need for us around those loosely affiliated people, as a way to, like, you know, have managing some of these external third-party identities, giving us some way to, like, you know, have them periodically attested, etc. Versus, you know, right now all our integrations is directly with Banner, for, you know, sort of official university people and stuff. So we're interested in co-manage, actually, and you know, when we get some time, we'll go explore that. But we don't currently run it, and we didn't unfortunately get to run Midpoint.
Cool. And then there's another one here. So with Savient, are you able to test a backup and test a restore? Can you use it in a DR situation?
I don't think we covered this, and maybe not known or whatever, but Savient is a cloud hosted product for us. And so I guess we haven't really considered those kind of features or whatever. I'm hoping that as a cloud hosted thing, there will be some automation around that sort of failover stuff.
I wonder if, and this may, I'm not sure what the poser had in mind. There's the Savient itself. What happens if it goes on the fritz? But there could be all the things that Savient integrates with, and one of them goes on the fritz, and you need to restore it, and Savient may need to play a role in that kind of thing. There'd be another way to understand this question.
Yeah, I don't know. We're not really involved in that. Like, the on-prem AD infrastructure is managed by another team. I don't know what their sort of like DR plans would be. But to your point, I mean, if it was like rebuilt from scratch, then obviously we'll be using Savient to like re-provision everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's another set of comments and sort of a question. One, I'll put it as a question. Wants to know if there is sort of a user group for, you know, Savient users, you know, in higher ed. And if there was, someone would love to join and kind of, you know, work with the group.
Jason can answer that. I think he's been involved in that.
I don't know if there's a Savient for higher ed SIG. We've attended, or I've attended at least, one Savient hosted special interest group. Maybe it was for higher. I don't think it was. They themselves provide that sort of a meeting series or webinar series where folks get together and present, very similar to IAM online format, where people talk about what they've done recently with the tool. We would really love to participate in such a conversation of in-common members also using Savient. We're aware that Worcester Polytechnic is using Savient pretty successfully. But yeah, whoever the questioner is, I would love to get in touch and have a call or email exchange, whatever, because going it alone sucks.
It does. And in this community, sometimes those things get started bottoms up. And so a call could be the inception of, a broader place where all the schools that had shared the concern get together in some way and deal with things. So Jeffrey Eaton, who was the poser, contact Jason Peak and you guys get it rolling, okay? Another question, what license challenges have you experienced? Are alumni services managed? Things about having access to getting transcripts in the future. I suppose maybe that means after the students have left, that kind of thing, have graduated. So those seem to be kind of like edge case issues that they're not like current employees at a regular corporation, yet they're part of our normal business operations. Are there any issues in using Savient or the licensing for it to support those use cases?
I'm trying to remember. So we have a license for Savient, and honestly, I don't remember the exact terms of it. I think it's licensed sort of on a per user basis or a per identity basis. But they seem to be pretty comfortable with us being kind of squishy on that. Like it doesn't apply like some hard limit, like, oh, you can't make a new user at some point, fortunately. I don't remember the exact details of that. That was part of the procurement phase that we didn't pay a whole lot of attention to, honestly. So we haven't had license challenges except just getting, the contracting done. Jason, did you have comments about licensing you wanted to add, or?
The 500,000 seats was the number I remembered, but I agree with you. It's fuzzy and we'd have to look it up.
Okay, because I saw from looking back at the data about OSU that you gave, you said you had 100,000 current accounts and users and 500,000 accounts or something like that. So that would include the alumni, I suppose, and things like that.
No, we actually don't provide the
Oh.
sort of central account for alumni. Our graduates get their sort of normal student account for an additional year after graduation. That's just part of our life cycle that we include. And then they go away, and our alums and alumni center do whatever they do. I actually don't know. But we don't provide them like the net ID on a long-term basis.
Thank you. Then there's a question about homegrown apps. First of all, do you have many of those?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Okay.
we have a couple ourselves, and then of course distributed folks have homegrown apps.
So as part of all this is zero trust stuff and Savient, perhaps, are you providing guidance or recommendations on how to integrate with Azure SSO? Do you prefer SAML or OIDC? Kind of if you're turning over all the soil, what's happening there?
Yeah, well, so before Azure, we offered SAML and CAS protocols, and I think a lot of folks chose CAS because there was some frameworks that made that really easy, and of course we have like a wild card, so it was sort of trivial for them to set that up. But we did have some people do SAML integrations, like simple SAML PHP or actually the SHIB SP, and we would kind of help them through that. We never did OIDC with Shibboleth, so going to Azure SSO, now we have that option available to us. And I think we're not really recommending per se, we're just listing that, SAML and OIDC are our supported protocols now. And so whatever they want to do there, but, in the midst of SAML, obviously we would mention Shibboleth to them as like, here's a possible choice for you, or your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, but a whole different slant. And that is focused on our own IAM applications. And looking forward to the year where we need to spend some time and, updating them and what have you. I'm particularly interested in applying the application pillar guidance to that effort, right? Figuring out where we're starting from, which is wherever it is, and then trying to get better. And through that effort of applying it to our own applications, my hope, my expectation is that we'll develop some expertise that we can share and, provide helpful recommendations to other folks. So, yeah.
Well, that is unsurprisingly sensible, Jason. There are a number of more questions. I'm going to keep going until I am prevented from continuing by the boss of this thing. We have a question. Say the name again. Who is it you adopted instead of Zero Trust? And I wonder if that means that's the implementation. Or was that Savient and the implementation partner? Anyway, this is someone from University of Washington, and they've been very interested in this, and they're likely going to be contacting you guys. You say the names again, and then we'll go to the next question.
I think Heidi is referring to our branding of Smart Access instead of Zero Trust.
Yeah.
If I read that question, but Heidi, chime in if there's something else you're looking for there, and contact us, of course.
Okay. Is it possible to elaborate the passwordless MFA plan?
Sure.
In 30 seconds.
Well, we have experimented in the Microsoft environment with Microsoft's passwordless solution, or they sometimes call it phone sign-in, depending where their documentation is today. That's with their Microsoft Authenticator app on the phone, which is sort of the equivalent of like Duo Mobile. It works. It is passwordless. You can also do passwordless with Microsoft stuff like Azure SSO with security keys, or passkeys, technologies, platform authenticators and stuff. I have a particular hatred for Microsoft Authenticator, the app. It is nowhere near as good or reliable as Duo. We've had lots of problems. We talked to Microsoft about them on a bi-weekly basis or whatever. We've ranted about it a lot. I'm not a fan of Authenticator as the passwordless solution. But so we've explored turning that option on, not the whole shebang of really getting rid of passwords. That's a very long tail. So just explorations and piloting at this point.
Thanks. That makes sense. Are you looking to use a Microsoft B2B or B2C capability for external identities?
That's an interesting question because we, dovetailing with that earlier thing about recommendations for application developers, we got contacted by someone using Microsoft Power Pages, I think, and they're rewriting an app that they've already had before into that. They want, of course, OSU authentication, and they mentioned, oh, we want to have some of our vendors be able to authenticate as well. And we're not really experts on Entra and Azure stuff, and so some quick Googling, though, suggested that those kinds of solutions, B2B, B2C, are what Microsoft recommends when you want to let people use sort of institutional and external identities. So when we get some time to explore that, that probably would be a recommendation. Jason?
Another place where B2B has come up is in a conversation with folks at Wisconsin who are doing interesting things using B2B, I believe, if I understood correctly, to kind of secure their normal Azure tenant and use a B2B isolated management tenant. I'm probably getting that wrong, Wisconsin, Tony. So apologies.
Sounds like an interesting concept anyway. And now we have only 2 minutes left. I'm not going to make April beat me over the head into silence. April, why don't you go ahead and take us out of here? And Jason and Andy, thanks again. That was really interesting and very informative.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Andy, and Jason for a wonderful and informative presentation this afternoon. We appreciate it. And just a couple of quick reminders before we let everybody go on with their day. Want to let you know that there is a quick survey you can take as you're exiting the webinar today. We'd appreciate your feedback. Also want to let you know about the next IAM Online, where we'll be continuing our discussion in Common Futures 2. And also, we welcome your ideas for future webinars. You can be a presenter like Jason or Andy, or suggest someone to present. Also, I want to thank our meetings team, Jennifer, and the rest of the team who support us in providing these webinars to you all each and every month. And with that, we hope to see everybody next month. Oh, also, one more thing. I do want to let you know about our base camp. Base camp, the registration is open for base camp, and we hope that you will go camping with us. And you can find out more details about that on our website. And so with that, we wish you all a great rest of the day, and thank you again for being here. We'll see you next month for another edition of IAM Online. Bye-bye.